So, I recently started watching The Fragrant Flower Blooms with Dignity after seeing all the hype online. Initially, I was interested by the excitement over it, but I couldn't get a good grasp on the story. I just kept seeing people say Kaoruko was the sweetest character ever conceived, and it seemed like Rintaro was a delinquent type. I kind of gathered it would be like Toradora, but if the female lead wasn't kind of insane. And I don't like romance stories where it's just two people being happy and in love, Horimiya. So it took me a bit to get on the bandwagon. But I finally got around to it, and yeah, surprise, surprise, everyone was right, and it's really good. I could talk about what I liked about it for another 10 minutes, but before, while, and after watching it, I just kept trying to figure out the delinquent main character. Or more specifically, the faux delinquent main character. When I watched Toradora, first of all, I was 12, but even on rewatch, I just thought it was a quirky little attribute for the main character to have. But with Fragrant Flower having the same type of main character, there was a question and a challenge that kept popping up in the back of my mind to figure out what this decision means for the story. Are there other characters that fit this vibe, or something similar along the spectrum? Tropes like tsuneres or kuderes have purpose in stories, for the themes and messages, at least when well done. Really, all tropes should. This should be no different. I haven't watched every anime, but I've seen quite a bit, so surely I can do a deep dive down memory lane and figure this out. Surprisingly, there wasn't much on the internet on this topic. Seriously, I was surprised, but that's okay. The conversation starts here. What is the significance of the seemingly delinquent main character? First thing to examine. Japanese society. Alright, I am not claiming to be an expert on Japanese culture, so this section will probably be short. However, you can't analyze media without taking into consideration the cultural context that surrounds it. The most obvious thing I've always thought about this trope is how Japanese culture is renowned for being homogenous, collectivist, uniform, whatever you want to call it. I hate making generalizations about anything, and I know there are plenty of exceptions, but expressions like the nail that sticks out gets hammered down first exist for a reason. I feel like a lot of these stories only work in the context of even exaggerated Japanese society. I mean, I have never seen people jump in the halls just by looking at someone who's conventionally good-looking with a glare. I think even someone like Sakura from Windbreaker would get a double take at best, not like ostracized from society for looking a certain way. So in the context of Japanese society, I can see it being a shortcut for a watch this person who was outcasted for the way they look fall in love type of story, which is heartwarming. Circling back to Horimiya, which I just said I don't like, but Miyamura was bullied in middle school for essentially being shy, if I recall correctly. So trying to define the trope, I think I would go for outcast love interest. What type of story is the outcast love interest trying to tell? And when I boil it down to just being an outcast love interest, actually, this is something we see in Western media a lot too. Western media loves a bad boy love interest. I'm sure there are better examples than what I'm going to bring up, but I do have a few, of course, as one of the most popular love interest tropes seems to be the delinquent or the troubled male lead. Even straight up criminal or evil, but I think that might be a bit too far on the spectrum for the purpose of this video. Or maybe not, we're exploring. But the closest equivalent I could think of might be someone like Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Not a main love interest, though people are almost conditioned to think of him as one. Jughead in Riverdale was sensitive, a writer, and so on, but also part of a gang. I dropped it at season 1, but he was really popular when the show came out. Then you have characters like Bender in The Breakfast Club. Again, actual criminal. These characters' rough exteriors are more like jumping off points to subvert expectations or go from one end of the spectrum of perception to the other. If I had to pick an equivalent, it'd be someone like Sakura from Windbreaker, the Body Improvement Club from Mob Psycho 100 maybe for minor characters, or hell, maybe even Denji. But They're different from characters like Rintaro because we see in episode 1 that he's just a regular guy. The subversion is not the point of his journey. So then, what's the point of making him delinquent looking? The genre is probably what matters most outside of cultural context. Chainsaw Man is technically a shonen, but Denji is almost too realistic to be deconstructed alongside these other characters, as his delinquency is neither superficial nor is it a subversive way to show he's actually a soft boy. Circling back to Sakura, he's in a shonen battle and delinquent story, but really, Windbreaker is like K-On! For rowdy boys, so that's more about the friends we made along the way. Again, more in line with series like Flunk Punk Rumble, where the delinquency is more of a jumping off point as we see how the character is positioned in the world around them. How do romance stories position delinquents relative to the world around them? Outcast. Okay, helpful, and covered in section 1. How do these stories position them relative to their love interests? Taiga is the exact opposite of Ryuji, looking cute but engaging in violent delinquency because she doesn't get any love at home. On the other hand, Karuko being a kind person who is accepting and encouraging of people, even in the face of any adversity, despite being small and cute, is contrasted with Rintaro being tall and sharp-looking, yet being full of self-doubt and uncertainty. I've only seen the anime for Fragrant Flower, but I realize one major difference between these stories is that Ryuji kind of saves Taiga, and Karuko, I wouldn't say saves Rintaro, but she kind of opens his eyes and lights a spark that enacts change for him. So it's really a situation of the male love interest versus the female love interest being the one who ignites the change. So, how are outcast characters with polar opposite love interests positioned in the genre? What type of romance stories are told with them? And I got it, I think. Feel-good stories, but in a particular way. Wump, or hurt comfort, whatever you want to call it. You take a beat-down character and introduce happiness into their life, and people feel good. Maybe Chainsaw Man wasn't above this categorization after all. But for real, you take characters who are deemed unworthy of love by society, and you make people feel bad about it. I mean, they're just people. Then you give them that appreciation, that warmth, and people feel happy. Delinquents and pseudo-delinquents aren't the only way to go about this, but it is effective in an exaggerated societal, and especially in a high school romance way. And maybe the larger points of the genre are these: the importance of looking beneath the surface, and who determines who is deserving of love, and why. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. This is my first video essay, so I'm not exactly sure how to best go about this, but hopefully it provided some interesting discussion points. I do really hate the sound of my own voice, but I would like to make more because it's fun to do deep dives like this. Anyways, thanks again. If you thought anything I had to say was interesting, leave a like, comment if you want to get some discussion going, and subscribe if you want to hear more from me. Hope to see you next time.